Okay, so let's broach the neck. And I'm going to introduce this yellow ochre. And so we're gonna take this kind of slow, just trying to get a feel for how this is gonna look. And I think what I would like to do is do like the same thing, a blue-gray background. So we're trying to go for something fairly natural here. Hope you can see that. So I'm glad I moved the neck down. So I'm kind of just making some general marks. And then I'm gonna use the brown to make some indication. So again, you don't have to go this far with it. It's kind of up to you. But I'm gonna make some indication of the pattern in the sweater. And so what you could do is just count out however many, or you could just eyeball them and space them correctly. We'll have to do a little bit more work here up in the neck. So she's got a lot of, there's a lot of shadow in there, so it's gonna be a combination of red and black to kind of push it into a violet. And then you can allow the paper to show through in some of those areas where she's a little bit lighter, a little more pale. And, you know, also just take into account that some of the things that happen in photography, that just because they're there doesn't mean that that you need to replicate it, because maybe they look fine in the picture because you accept it as a picture, but then when you go to translate as a drawing, it might not translate correctly, or it might just look strange. Like for example, this this shadow, if you don't do it correctly, it's just gonna look like a beard. So you have to be very cautious of how dark, how sharp your edges are, whether it's being diffused correctly, whether it looks like it's sitting on the neck, whether you have enough black distributed everywhere. So, you know, a lot of how we take our cues from an image has to do with the context of what else is present in the rest of the drawing. And so hopefully that makes sense. So I gotta increase that neck shadow. So go back to the brown. And the shadow's pushed all the way to the edge, so you can see it's darker here. Some of this stuff's pretty straightforward. You're just taking your cues from light effects. If it's dark, you make it dark. And you match the color and you match the shape. And other things, you know, that's up to you in terms of how you're interpreting the picture, or what seems appropriate for whatever level of realism you're sort of going for. I like drawings that kind of straddle realism and in some aspects have things that are purely about drawing, like they have nothing to do with the photograph. So, you know, it just depends on where you stand with some of those things. So I noticed that here, that's a soft edge. So I'm just gonna leave that how it is. And in order to keep the neck from looking like a weird tube, there's the trachea here. So you have to make this feel volumetric. This comes toward us, and then it dips away, and then it comes toward you again. And if you're not looking for those things, then you're simply going to see it as a tube rather than a series of muscles that kind of undulate. So when you're drawing, draw with what I call form ideas, meaning when I look at this, I'm not just looking at what the color is, where the shadow is, but I'm also thinking about like what's creating the form. What direction is the form moving in? So, and that sort of comes from experience. That's where learning anatomy becomes important. And if you don't learn anatomy, then at the very least, you should be learning construction drawing, which is like simplifying anatomy into a series of like boxes and spheres and things, so that you're sort of tackling perspective and approximating anatomy. You could still learn about the structure of things. So I like how light it is, and then I realize that didn't make the shadow dark enough, so. Okay, so I think in this case, maybe adding the little crease of the neck, just slight indication, might be helpful. And it kind of just breaks up this big shape. Otherwise, you sort of start to see it as a tube. And there's more shadow on the right side, so slowly increase the shadow. And what I want to say, a couple other things, is you want to treat like every square inch of your drawing with the same level of responsibility and interest that you have for the nose or the eyes, or meaning you're sort of responsible for everything that you put into it. And when you put a lot into the face and then you put nothing into the rest, unfortunately, those things are going to stand out a lot. And that's one of the pitfalls, one of the most common things that happens as we learn to draw. We sort of become selective, and we only want to draw the interesting parts, and then we leave a lot of things unfinished. It's kind of like, if you can imagine, if that was acceptable for all creative people, you would be listening to music that was about 45 seconds long, lots of incomplete sentences or poetry or whatever, and somebody would simply say, well, yeah, but I wasn't interested in the other things, So it is a certain level of commitment and responsibility, and it is a difficult thing to, because it comes down to discipline and overcoming like your own level of boredom while you're drawing, like a neck, which might not seem as interesting as drawing the other things, but you're doing it for the whole piece. You're doing this so that this looks better, so that this plays off of each other, so it has the proper context. And sometimes in the era of Instagram and YouTube, we might start to see more and more people take less responsibility for what they're putting out there. You'll just see like, oh, how to draw a nose, how to draw an eye, and that's fine. But if you only ever draw eyes, never a face, or never a neck, and just a series of floating heads, like you shouldn't, you should be realistic about your expectations. You're probably not going to get much farther, because there's a lot more to the whole image and the context in which we receive it. So I think next couple of videos, what I want to do is hopefully address other things like gesture, which if you were to take a traditional drawing course, like if you were to take a drawing course in college or something like that, that's usually one of the first things that they teach you, like gestural drawings. And I actually have a different philosophy. Not that I love gestural drawings, but I think that they're kind of advanced. I don't think that they're beginner stuff. And so in a way, you learn this kind of more rigid approach. You learn the construction, you learn the boxes, you learn, how to line things up. And then you set all of that stuff aside, and then you sort of backtrack, and you have to learn now how to breathe life back into it. And I think that's where the gesture comes, because now you're coming from it from a level of understanding that the thing that is going to take your picture, your image to the next level is, to breathe life into it. And that has to do a lot with gesture. And in order to talk about some of these concepts, which I feel are a little bit advanced, although it's not necessarily an advanced practice to sit there and make sinuous lines, it's the thought process that needs to go into it, the level of maturity and experience that you need to have behind your intention of making a squiggly line. We talk about things like, you gotta breathe life into it. That's kind of it's like a difficult thing to grasp if you have no experience drawing. So I don't really believe in just setting students loose and keeping them busy and telling them you need to make gestural lines if they don't know enough of the language. So okay, so for me, I think that's probably red enough. I don't want to make it totally purple. And I am gonna accent a little bit here with the white, my personal choice. So, okay, I'm glad that this caught this. Sometimes when you're working with colored pencils, you get these little stubborn areas, and that usually means you have a color that won't blend. So I'm just gonna erase it. I'm erasing both colors. So I probably had some yellow or brown that the white didn't want to go over. So I erased both of them. Now I'm just gonna add white. And so now it's not gathering exactly the way it was earlier. So assuming that you haven't loaded it with a lot of colored pencil, with a lot of wax from the colored pencil, then it should still come up. Okay, so let's go back to doing the shirt. I think in this case you can go either way with making a very solid yellow. And I think that would look really good too. I think, what I was saying is you don't want to obliterate the color, but you also want to do what's right for the image. And I think if it feels right to have a strong, bold color statement, then you should do that if that's really what you think will make this into an interesting image. I like to play it a little safe, and I usually wait until I have at least this much thought out, and then I'll make a decision about how strong or how punchy I want my colors to be. So I kind of like this sporadic of approach to the pattern because it kind of seems to fit enough, and I don't feel like it's detracting. Sometimes less is more, and it sits better because you're sort of suggesting, and it just kind of depends on what level of control and interest you can draw from your images. And again, a lot of what I'm looking at from this picture is because it's in my opinion, it's a good photograph already. So I already started off with something that I think was a good image. So sorry if these the pencils are short, but As you can see, I use them until they're practically gone. You can see what's left of the the white. So, you know, I don't just throw them out. They still, and in my opinion, you know, they have enough life left. Plus, I have lots and lots of sets of colored pencils. So the reason I was saying is, if you can't see it, I'll try and hold it. But I know sometimes on the video I'll be doing something like that and you won't be able to see because my hand is in the way. Okay, so part of what I want to do is, if you see this blue here, that's from a different drawing. I like that blue, but I would like to make it a little bit more gray and then do it all over the picture. And there isn't really anything superbly mysterious about how to put it down. I think it's just, you know, putting it down slowly and distributing. So if I'm recording this, I might speed it up for you in some of those areas, because that's a lot, and I'm not sure that there's anything super mysterious about that. So also a good tip is, when you make a line, keep hatching and bring that color in. So I'll show you. I made a line and now I'm going to, because there is a shadow, and so hatch right up to that edge and turn a line into a shadow. That kind of helps establish some of the lighting effects. So another tip is, when you don't have the color, shoot for value, meaning obviously this isn't really brown, it's like a reddish orange and yellow, but I'm gonna use the brown, and all I am really concerned about is matching how light or how dark some of these passages are, and it'll work fine. Just do a quick angle. So hopefully you can kind of see how that's coming out. And so I'm sort of skipping intermittently, just choosing these patterns here with the knitting, because I think they look cool, or they look interesting. Because to me they say something about the nature of the sweater. I think the key is also try and have a tasteful approach to your detail, how you're sort of skipping around, and you know, that's going to be different for different people. It's hard to gauge your level of taste, what you think is too much, what you think is not enough. So for me, I always think, you know, a little less is a good starting point. Okay, so for this, we don't need the image, but I would suggest that whatever color, so I have a azure, which is obviously just blue. This is probably sky blue or cobalt blue. But I'm still gonna lay it down, excuse me, I'm still gonna lay it down fairly light at first, just so I don't get a lot of surprises in my distribution of color. But I'll just go through it for a couple minutes and you can watch. But I'm doing kind of longer, like an oval, but really long. So it looks like I'm going up and down, but I'm actually kind of doing a little bit of an oval. And all this stuff is kind of up to you. Like, you don't have to do any of this. The reason I'm doing it is just so that you can see something from start to finish, and a lot of people might stop. And there's actually a ton more work to be done on the shirt, so it's just the same thing that I've been doing. You just do more of it. The second reason I want to keep this fairly light is because I want to be able to add some white to it. So if I press down really hard, then you have to contend with more chalk, or excuse me, more wax. And the approach for colored pencil and pastel is not exact. You don't have the glare problem with pastel. But it's a similar enough process that if you were watching a colored pencil video, you could apply, and vice versa, you could apply some of the same steps. So the one advantage that pastel has is that you could also watch a pastel video and apply those things to oil paint. Not so much with this. It's related enough to drawing with hatching and cross hatching that it is different enough that I don't know how helpful it would be. But it would be really helpful too if you were using colored pencil to flesh out ideas for oil paint. So that would be helpful. And I'm not really adding any pressure, I'm just using the weight of the pencil and just controlling the shape. I'm using that to dictate, you know, how much color is going down. That seems to be the right amount for what I want right now. So the other reason that I'm doing this very lightly is because I don't want to have uneven streaks. The moment you apply pressure, you're sort of also assuming that you're going to have a very consistent hand and being able to maintain that pressure. If you just use the weight of the pencil, then it is consistent pressure, rather than giving your hand a cramp or something, trying to sustain something. Okay, so I'm gonna keep working on this, and then I will check back in a couple of minutes, and you might see white, more blue, more intense, and then you might see more of the sweater worked on. So I thought this might be kind of interesting for somebody to see. I found an old Renaissance image, and I thought that might be kind of cool. I'll do it on one side. So I'm adding a darker blue, and I'm just going to kind of indicate some of the shapes of this hill. So basically I added some white on the blue. I did 2 passes of the blue with the lighter blue. This is the blue I used. And now I'm using a darker blue. And I'm just going to make some of these little hills. And you could, if you have a chosen landscape that you like, you could certainly use that. And you know, I'm gonna save this image real quick. And you can you can borrow from as many images that you think are suitable. For example, if you wanted to add more foliage or something, or this one, for example, I kind of like these little shapes of the shrubbery. And maybe a little mountain. And so I want to make the back lighter blue, or I should say cooler blue. And then we're gonna increase, since there's white there, I'm just gonna do a very, very light pass of this blue. And then I'll add white. So I just gotta extend it all the way out. So I'm gonna add it up to here, and then we'll check back. Okay, so I've kind of laid it out. I've just been kind of borrowing, making up shapes. I'll show you. There's another. So I just typed in Flemish Renaissance portrait. So I'm using a little bit of green, but I laid everything down with brown. I want to make this kind of dark. So first brown, and then some green on top. And then I'm gonna go over it with black in the shadows. But you can see, like, you know, these are really simple shapes, and they're already, you know, sort of approximating, you know, the effect. So I'm gonna go in with black and indicate some of those shadow shapes of the leaves. Again, you don't have to go super dark. You just, my goal is believability. So if that means it looks believable the way it is now, then it's probably better to leave it before you add too much and then it becomes hard to erase. Hopefully you can see what's going on. So I'm going to work on this a little bit and then we'll check back. Okay, so let's summarize what we've done. I added a little bit of the yellow ochre onto the green. I added the cloud, a little bit of some cloud work back there. And then I'm just punching this green up a tiny bit. I think a little bit goes a long way. And I add a little bit of white over the yellow ochre. Sort of indicate a path, like what's going on there. So yeah, you can kind of be as creative as you want, and like I said, you don't have to go this route. I just thought it'd be kind of fun. So now you have to do the same thing to the other side. So we'll just continue, you know, these mountain shapes. Again, I'm using the same blue. And then I'll probably add, with blue, a group of trees. Probably some pine or cypress or something. I don't know if you can see. I'll move this out of the way. I don't know if you can see that on the left side or not, but maybe you'll see it when I kind of add the silhouette. And then the next step would be to make the white go down to the horizon line. And you know, I learned these techniques by copying Renaissance painters like Raphael. One of my favorites, his name is Hans Memling. He's a Dutch Renaissance artist, although he's extremely hard to copy. Still though, as far as like inspiration is concerned, it's not like you have to make an exact copy or something like that, but it's really just about where you draw your inspiration from. And then I'll show you quickly, you know, our dispersal of the white. There's more light down by the horizon than there will be, excuse me, up in the sky. So and it's tricky because I'm pressing fairly hard as I add more and more, especially down here, and this has a kind of a streaky quality. So different brands of colored pencil don't always play well together. And so sometimes to combat that, I have to change directions and go totally sideways. That's just the nature of, if you're not adding a ton of color, which I don't like to do, in the beginning, you know, you're like trying not to treat this like a crayon, but rather build an impression while still maintaining the drawing. Then you will get some of these streaky things. So, you know, just be aware of what brands interact well with each other and which ones See, now I'm going the other direction to try and offset a lot of the streaky qualities that were going vertically. And I like this broken appearance, so I'm happy with that. But I still have to feather it into the blue so it doesn't just stop abruptly. So I'm gonna go up, and as I'm going down, I'm adding more pressure, and then less pressure as I go up. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is I went over the white very lightly with the yellow ochre. I'll show you that in a second. If I can find it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so just super lightly. And the camera might not be able to catch it, so I'll have to send a picture. But I think those angle shots, you can kind of see how much pigment. But there you have it. I hope this has been helpful. Again, you know, it's just gonna be a matter of going in with your brown next, assuming that you want to keep it kind of muted. And you know, this is my tree shape. And then I'll go in with a little bit of green and then black for the shadows, and that's basically it. So I'll go ahead and sign this guy. I'm gonna try red. So again, I hope you found this helpful, and I hope that, apologize for some of the camera work, but I was trying to show different areas. So, all right.